Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be bringing you this special episode of the podcast, giving you a chance to listen in on the onstage conversation I had with Jane Rosenthal and Lesli Linka Glatter, part of the Anglers' partnership with the annual NAB Show in Las Vegas this year. Jane and Lesli are both titans in their respective parts of the industry. Jane is a film producer and the co-founder of the Tribeca Festival, and among her many credits is being the executive producer of the film currently playing at the Sphere in Las Vegas, Darren Aronofsky's Postcard from Earth. Lesli, meanwhile, has directed episodes of some of the most famous television shows of all time, from Twin Peaks to Homeland, and she's also the director of the iconic feature film Now and Then. On top of all of that, she has served as the president of the Directors Guild since 2021. Jane and Lesli have also been friends since they first started in the industry in the 1980s. They even went to the Oscars together. And they've weathered so many transformations in the business while still remaining really remarkably optimistic about what can happen when you have a good story and figure out a way to tell it. We spoke for an hour about so many things, from the terrible advice they dealt with from their earliest bosses to the ways the industry can actually thrive in the age of AI. Jane also shared a scoop about the film that will open this year's Tribeca Festival in June, and some insight into her next project for the Sphere, which will present the classic The Wizard of Oz in an entirely different way. I really can't wait to see it. I loved talking to these women and left the conversation feeling really energized about the ways that good work can emerge no matter how many obstacles you put in front of it. I think you'll feel the same way. So now listen to my conversation with Lesli Linka Glatter and Jane Rosenthal. Thank you both so much for being here. Hello. So we have you here because you both have careers full of storytelling to talk about, but you're also here because you've been friends for a long time. And I honestly don't know, and I would love for them to know too, how you became friends and where you were in your respective careers in the industry when this happened.
I had just moved to LA from Tokyo. I had spent 11 years overseas when I was a modern dancer and choreographer, so a whole nother career. And you were one of the first people I met in the film. You were in TV then.
I was at CBS Television Network in Studio City, and I was doing television movies. And so in the 5 years that I was doing television movies there, I did 70 television movies, which was an extraordinary 5 years. 5 years, because the network was always going into third place. And when they didn't know what to do, they threw on a television movie. So there would be 4 or 5 nights of television movies.
And were you producing these movies? What was your job?
I was an executive, and I was 23, 24 years old, only woman.
Yeah, I feel like the theme is going to come up for a lot of you as being the only woman in a room and saying, I'm just going to push forward on it anyway.
Many years. And I had made my first short film, which was everything I was told not to do if I wanted a job in Hollywood. Because it was 3/4 in Japanese with subtitles, had flashbacks, narration, was a period piece set in World War II, and had one Caucasian character in it.
Oh, and then how'd that movie turn out? I feel like it got some acclaim that,
Yes, it did. And we went, didn't we go to the Academy Awards together when I was nominated?
Yes, we did.
Yes.
I love that. What did you wear?
What did I wear? Oh, I know exactly what I wore. Because I was a modern dancer, so I didn't have any money. I went to a vintage clothing store and got a 52 Norel dress for probably $50 and felt very glam. But the best thing, we pull up to the red carpet and everyone is there waiting for their favorite movie star to come out. And I'm feeling good about myself. I mean, I'm nominated for an Academy Award. I mean, my first film, I step out on the carpet and there's a wave of people and they say, it's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. It's nobody. I was laughing so hard. It's like, never take yourself too serious or you'll hear that chorus. But the person that came after us, Prince.
He's somebody, I think.
He's somebody. People lost their minds. So that was how we met.
I mean, I wanted to ask you guys when we're in this event about the power of storytelling and reframing things and expanding what the definition can be. And I wanted to ask you before we get to specifics about a time that you remember knowing what a rule of storytelling was and saying, I'm going to do something different. Like maybe even the first time that you said, like, this is what I've been told has to happen, and deciding to go your own way and realizing the reward from that. And Lesli, maybe it's being a modern dancer and making a short film, or maybe there's another answer for it. But I assume you both had that moment pretty early on.
I have an early on story, and then I have a more current story. But the early on story was being at CBS and having bought a book. It was called The Burning Bed. And I was fascinated with the story that it was a justifiable homicide, because I couldn't understand how there could ever be a justifiable homicide. And it was really the story of domestic abuse. And my boss at the time, who had worked with Tracy and Hepburn and John Wayne and had made all of these like seminal classic Hollywood, traditional Hollywood films, looked at me and said, Janie, nobody cares about a man who beats up his wife. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to get this thing done. And it ended up getting made by Brandon Tartikoff, who at the time was at NBC. And that's kind of when I knew the rules and programming kind of had to change. But I think the fact that I was even in the room was change itself at the time.
That's a really good point, because you have to get in the room first. My first series that I ever directed, my first job in Hollywood was Amazing Stories, which was an anthology series that Steven Spielberg produced and directed a lot of. And he was my first mentor and gave me my first jobs.
Yeah, does he still call you his protege? I think I've heard you say that.
And he's still my mentor. And every time I see him, he goes, my protege. At my age, I'll be like 107 with a walker and I'll still be the protege. But my first job as a director in television was Twin Peaks. And
about breaking some rules.
Was about rule breaking.
Yeah.
It was not following the normal conventions of storytelling, though it did tell a really good story and was very honest to that. Because as far as I'm concerned, and I think I'm speaking for Jane, story is everything. Doesn't matter how you shoot it. If you don't have a good story, doesn't matter what you do.
Well, the name of this panel is Technology and the Future of Storytelling.
Yeah.
You can have all the technology in the world. If you can't tell a good story, forget it. So that's key. And there's some extraordinary technology that is coming out. And, AI is really game changing, but you have to be able to tell a story.
And you have
you have to be the creator. And I think that's opening up a whole world for people who have not had access to a certain kind, the ability to create. And this is creating a world for a new kind of creator to come into our industry.
Yeah. And I think one of the places where you can see so much of those new kinds of storytellings and the way the technology and, film and television overlap is the Tribeca Festival. I think we get to announce some news about this year's festival, which is very exciting, and the opening night film for this year's festival in June.
Well, we're going to have Billy Joel's film, And So It Goes, opening Tribeca on June 4th. And it's going to be very exciting. Two returning filmmakers are back, Jessica Levin and Susan Lacey, and Beacon Theater. And we're really excited. A true New Yorker.
Yeah. Thank you for letting us share that here. It's very exciting. And, the history of music in Tribeca, I think that's one of the other ways that you get at this festival that's saying it's not just about movies or filmmakers. It's about so many different forms of art. So it feels like that film as an opening night film really carries on that tradition.
And we have more music at the festival this year than ever before. So many music docs. We've opened with music docs in the past. We had Nas's film, Illmatic. We've had, again, just so many different music pieces at the festival. But, they tell a story too. And how do you tell a story in a song? I always wanted to do the Piano Man as a series. You start to listen to that. But we dropped the name film because we were doing so many things, whether it was VR or games. And how do you look at game creators and they're the directors. They're telling nonlinear, novelistic stories. As long as you've got a creative center, stories can come from anywhere. They can come from your iPhone. Although back in the early days of Tribeca, the first film from a phone that we showed was on a Nokia.
Wow.
It was done by a soldier who had been in Afghanistan. And when we projected it, it had this, cinema verte feeling. It felt like Roma Sita Aborta from Rossellini. It was really extraordinary. So we've been open to all kinds of storytelling and finally said, okay, let's just call it Tribeca Festival.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things you've got this year's festival as well in that storytelling vein is the Storytelling Lab, I think it's called. That to me, I think, and Leslie, I'm sure you've encountered this too, the pipeline problem, the idea of if you've got a story, if you want to get into something, even though everyone's got a camera in their pocket now, like figuring out how to get those stories out in the world, it feels challenging in a lot of ways. Is that something you feel like you're addressing with the Storytelling Lab?
Without question, we have our first Storytellers Summit this year, which will have, it's welcome to anybody, whether you're a filmmaker or an AI creator or a music video director, you can come to this. And it's really trying to bring people together with people who are distributors and, can really help get your work out there. There clearly is a problem right now within distribution in terms of independent film. You're not seeing independent films. Enough independent films get picked up. So there are some platforms out there that show independent films, which is great, but there are amazing creators and, amazing, people from all different communities that are telling stories that we don't get to see every day on Netflix or Amazon
And I have to say, it's really important that we keep the prominence of the theatrical feature film. As much as it's great to get your stories out there, whatever way you can, theatrical feature films, we can't lose that. That's a different kind of experience.
We can't lose that. It's incumbent upon the theater owners to make sure that we have great theaters to go to. When they started making theaters smaller and smaller, and all of a sudden you could just lean back and make sure you can have a drink and the screen is this size, you do rather stay home sometimes. So it's really incumbent to have these. We lost the Ziegfeld in New York. You don't have Plaza. Paris Theater is, it is a Netflix theater for rent. It's incumbent on the theater owners too to make it a great place that you want to go to.
Because the community of watching something together and having that shared experience is really powerful.
Yeah, especially with a comedy. You don't laugh as hard if you're at home alone.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm imagining having made Meet the Parents that's a prime moment where you realize the power of something.
Jay Roach would break down the laughter and it would be, do you have a head bobber, a knee slapper, or an elbow? And the goal was to try to get all three like that and have this rolling laughter.
I mean, Leslie, with your work as the president of the Directors Guild, I mean, the idea of taking down boundaries for new storytellers and making room for more people to come in, I imagine that's a really big part of your work as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the Directors Guild, we're a labor union and we represent 19,800 members. And that's 40% is also made up not just directors. And again, we represent theatrical feature films and TV directors and news directors and sports directors and reality directors. So it's a big gamut. And then we also represent unit production managers and first assistant directors. And so we're a real labor union because 40% is the directorial team.
Yeah.
And, for me, I started off, there were so few women directing. But I came out of dance, so I never saw that as a problem. But then when I started looking around, I'm like, you know what? I'm working all the time, knock on whatever, and I need to be part of the solution. So I started mentoring women and people of color years and years and years ago, because listen, there's not just one seat at the table for us. There's room to tell all kinds of stories. And that's what's exciting. You want a very diverse slate of stories.
But Leslie, when you were coming up, one of the issues would always be you were getting just films that were women stories.
Yes. Because as a woman, I represent all women. But that was really, well, Leslie, can you tell us about the women's point of view? I'm like, well, I can tell you my point of view. I don't know if I can speak for all of us. But yeah, some of the things that were said, I'm sure you had it as well, which now I'm like, oh my goodness, like, we hired a woman once, but it didn't work. No.
Because a man could, and I think some of it, a guy can go out and make a film and it can flop. A woman goes out and makes a film, and if it flops, it's her fault.
Well, also, Lesli, when you made your first feature film in theaters, you told a woman's story. You made the film Now and Then, which is extremely important to me personally, maybe some other people in this room as well. And it's because it was so specific. It wasn't just like, this is a story that's for all women. This is for people who understand the incredible power of 12-year-old girls in some way. So that felt like a moment where you really said, like, I can get this one really specific story out there that's not being told by anybody else.
No, and that's why I wanted to tell it. But I've gone back and forth from doing kind of hard-hitting political thrillers and action because I'm interested in certain themes. And I guess I keep coming back to those themes till you work them out in your own life. But I'm always interested in things not being what they appear to be. So you have to look deeper to see what's really going on. And people being put in extraordinary circumstances where they're forced to deal with who they really are. It's like I wanted to tell a story of what it's like to have those powerful female friends when you're 12 years old, those friends that change your life forever and you're never going to be the same again. And that was not out there in any way.
And it's still not. There's still not that many movies about that, which I find very baffling.
But I have to say, we just had a dinner at the DGA. It was called TV Directors Night. And it's just a reason to get together and talk about what we do, and exchange ideas and tell stories. And when I first went to that, it was like 300 men, 5 women, and 6 people of color. And I looked out around the group of directors there, and it was so wonderfully diverse. Plenty of white men, but there was no way that you would have felt like the only woman. It was wonderful to see. And that's how things have changed. And that's great.
So, Jane, when Leslie's making Now and Then in that period of the 90s, you move into producing films, a lot of them with Robert De Niro, who's been your collaborator for a long time. What were the stories at that point that were being allowed to be told or could make it through the pipeline? And how have you watched that process kind of change about what stories that the industry feels open to?
Produced so many movies.
So many.
Like a lot.
As a producer, you have to be passionate about what kind of story you want to tell and what you want to do. And nobody's going to wake up and say, oh, Tribeca didn't have a Christmas movie. It didn't have a summer movie. So it can take us years to develop something before it actually makes it to screen. And I think, we didn't want to take no for an answer in a lot of cases. So it's different than when you were at CBS or when I was at Universal or Disney, and, you had to work to make sure you had those tentpole movies. But for, when I look at something like A Bronx Tale, took us years to get made. Irishman took 10 years to get made. They take a long time. But for me and for Bob, it's just about our passion for something. Even if it's called Meet the Fockers, you can have passion.
But we were just talking about Wag the Dog right before this. And the fact that got made how many years ago? Like
29 and a half years ago.
Which was so ahead of its time.
Was kind of this crazy story, loosely based on a book by Larry Beinhart. But David Mamet came along and the concept was, what if the president's poll numbers were down and you had to make up something to have them go up and erase a sexual scandal? So obviously those issues are still in the news today.
And then too, it was ahead of its time then and remains so, which is a real feat. I mean, and Lesli, you've worked as a producer as well. And I feel like for directors and producers also, but I guess from producers for you guys, there's a gut instinct. I know this is good and I need to keep pushing, or I know this person said no, but maybe I can get them to say yes in the right way. How do you hone that instinct? How do you learn what is your gut and how to trust it over the years? Is it something you have to learn over time, or do you come in with it?
There are musical chairs in executives' offices. So you just wait till one leaves and then you go back and you sit it again.
Rotate out.
Rotate out. You just go back again and again. Or you find independent money, and that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. Especially if it's an idea you're absolutely passionate about. And I think you should only do things you're absolutely passionate about.
Do you always have that choice, though? That's the...
No.
Sometimes you have to go to work.
No, not always. But I feel like at the end of the day, you have to have a point of view about the material you're working with. And if I don't relate to it, I really don't. Someone else should do it who loves that material. So now that's much easier to say, no, I'm not the right person for this. I don't see this.
Yeah. That's a fascinating thing as a TV director, too, because, on television, like there's a showrunner and there's a bunch of writers and you can come in as a director for one episode or two or something like that. And obviously there's some like Homeland, which you stick with for a long time.
Right.
But how do you do that and connect in that way to something that's, often running without you?
That's a great question, because I develop a lot of material, and that's mostly the material I'm doing now. But when you're hired as a TV series director, and you haven't developed the show, you're not running the show, you're basically, and I'm going to steal this from Paris Barkley, a wonderful director. Basically, he said, you're going into someone's kitchen and you're being asked to make a gourmet meal, but you have to make it out of the ingredients they have. But you have no excuse not to make an absolutely delicious meal. And I think that's what being a series director is. Yeah. You're not inventing the kitchen. Or the sandbox. You're going into someone else's, but you have to tell the best version of that story you can tell.
And Jane, I feel like for the producer, it's you are creating the sandbox in some ways, but there's always the decision that rolls up to you. It's like, can we lose this location? Can we take a day out of the schedule? There's so many compromises that can be made, and then slowly you've taken away what you have. How do you stick with that and saying, I know that we need this. I know we have to spend the money to get this thing to make the project what it needs to be.
Well, Paula Weinstein, who passed away a year ago, was a great partner of mine, not only in the Tribeca Festival, but also we had made 2 movies together, which would analyze this and analyze that. And there were times that, there was one time the studio we didn't have enough money left. The studio didn't want to do the Tony Bennett scene at the end. And Paula and I were like, okay, if I take 50 from my salary and 50, we were like sitting there with a hat, maybe,
horse trading.
Horse trading. There are times you've done that. But the other thing that's actually amazing when you put a whole team of people together, and you're given constraints. Sometimes you actually come up with something that's far more creative than if you had all the money in the world. And that's been the side of it that I find the most interesting, is when you've been told yes, and now all of a sudden you're told no about something. How do you mold that into something that is even more exciting? And
that can become an opportunity.
Yeah.
When that, I feel like we're dealing with that all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Because you're so excited that you have been told yes. It's a no business. It's always somebody's always there to say no.
Yeah.
Do it. So when you hear that word yes, you're like, okay, I'm going to do it and I'll figure out it.
You let that be the fuel that pushes you forward. So Lesli, you had worked on a lot of the shows that in this period in the 2000s and 2010s really felt like it was making television really turn into something different. I mean, thinking of Mad Men and Homeland or even Gilmore Girls, really. How much of that change did you feel in real time as it was happening? Like knowing the rules, knowing this world of television, you'd come at bed where it says this and how it has to be done. At what point do you realize like, oh, the frame is expanding? Like what is possible is really different than what it used to be?
I think there was a huge shift in the business where a lot of mid-range movies stopped being made. The more character-driven dramas or comedies, because it cost so much to release a movie. So the movies that were getting made were really small indie movies or big tentpole comic book movies. And all of that really interesting, complicated, complex character pieces went to TV. And I think as a result of that, TV got really good. So the differential between film and TV has fallen away. Like now you can do a story for the length of time it needs to be. If you have a 6-hour story, you can make it 6 hours. If you have an ongoing series or 8 hours or 2, depending on what the material is. And that's really exciting for filmmakers. And I think the difference is in terms of process between in the old days, other than like the Twin Peaks or West Wings, TV was the second cousin of feature films. And I think now you cannot rely on that. You have to tell a visual story no matter what the delivery system is. So I think it made TV become really good.
If you look at Netflix, do I know the difference between if it's a feature that's on Netflix or is it a limited series? Bob chose to do 0 Day because it's a good story. And do you look at that and say, oh, that's television?
I mean, that cast is insane. Like talking about what you can bring people to television, like breaking down those boundaries. Like, got Robert De Niro leading that. I mean, has he made a television show before that? Like this blurring that boundary, but getting all of those people in there together, like, as a director, like, what do you get to do when you're given that cast and this kind of complex story and so many episodes to tell? And you directed all the episodes of 0 Day, so you really go,
yes. I directed all of them. You just go, I am the luckiest director to be working with this cast. No, and I have to say, when I first started working with Bob, I was a little intimidated. He's a legend, but I have to say, you get to know him. He's a great collaborator. He is wonderful to work with, and he has a great sense of humor. He's a lot of fun. And he works really hard. But listen, I am interested in complicated material, and I like questions that don't have answers. I think a scene where two characters who have completely opposing views and they're both right is totally fascinating to me. So this was not about white hats or black hats. It really 0 Day asked the question, what is truth in a post-truth world? And what is each individual character's moral compass as far as it relates to truth? And all of those characters have a different relationship with truth. And that's probably the question we all need to ask ourselves now in this political climate. If we can't agree on what is fact, how do we have a conversation?
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about Wag the Dog earlier in terms of everything being topical. But, you made I think the process of 0 Day had been delayed by the strikes. Like it had been in the works for a long time. So who could have known how timely it would be? But, when you're dealing with that kind of material and knowing the real world could change around you, how do you plan for that?
Well, I mean, we had incredible advisors. So having come off of doing years of Homeland, we had access to the heads of CIA, NSA, DNI, State Department, and you use all those advisors because this is something that's supposed to feel realistically real. And the one thing that has not happened, thank goodness, is a 0 Day event that affects every industry at the same time. There have been many 0 Day events, but they found the flaw in the software so it can be repaired. So a single industry is taken down. But this is the biggest fear of the intelligence community, is that this will happen and then panic would ensue.
Does it make you live your life a little differently with your phone and knowing how vulnerable we are if it all shuts down?
It's aviation, transportation, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like asking those provocative questions and see how we humans respond to that.
When do you say you can't sleep at night?
No, but I'm doing something now called Imperfect Women. So it's a totally different thing.
There you go.
I need to do something completely different afterwards.
Yeah. Well, Jane, is that true for you too? That, when you're working on a lot of different projects and, we'll get into the sphere in a moment, you have a really wide range of influences. Jumping from thing to thing kind of help you recalibrate. Do you feel like you need to have a lot of different topics and different directions going at once?
Yeah.
I think that's just the way I live my life.
Yeah. Is it the problem of a producer where there's just always going to be a lot of fires to put out?
Well, I'm always afraid that there's not going to be like the next project. It's just what happens as a producer because it's like a startup every time. So you're always doing a startup
every time.
And, whether it's story, just this, you come up with the story, you're putting the writer together, directors together, the money, like everything is your fundraising, your marketing. So I don't want to like have somebody say to me, "Oh, it's terrible." Now I'm sounding like sounding a little insecure here for the moment, but no, but it's true. It's like, I'm always afraid somebody's going to say to me, "So they say, what are you doing next?" And I'm sitting there like, well,
you want to be busy as forever,
I like being busy. And also the Tribeca Film Festival was really a change in my life and Bob's life, in that we started it after 9/11. We really only thought we were going to do the festival once. And it was really just to bring people back downtown after 9/11, to be able to say that we're still here, we're still standing, and to give our neighborhood a new memory and something to look forward to. So now, as the festival is going into its 24th year, the kinds of creators, filmmakers, people from all walks of life that we have gotten to meet and to help bring their projects a platform has really been extraordinary. And the way we've also been able to mentor filmmakers, storytellers, no matter at what part of their career they're in, has also been really fulfilling. And, I think a lot about that too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that idea of like bringing people back in, getting everyone together, recovering in some way has been such a theme for the film industry for the last 5 years. You get a pandemic, you get the strikes, Los Angeles on fire earlier this year. Like, for both of you guys, like, what is the sense of recovery that you're feeling of, people kind of being willing to work together to get into whatever the next phase of this is going to be? Or are they not willing to work together?
Well, we're in a really critical time now. Because as a result, the triple whammy of COVID and the strikes and, of course, the LA fires, and production is down almost 40% nationwide. That's terrifying, and, a lot of work is being cut down. There was a decline in making material since 2016, but it was gradual. And now there's a big jump, and a lot of work has gone overseas. And it really is incumbent on us to keep Hollywood alive. The idea of Hollywood, storytelling capital. We need to keep work in America, and we have the best possible crews. And so many people are out of work right now. So this is a huge issue with recovering from all of these different things.
I mean, Jane, when you're encountering kind of the next generation, people who are trying to become the next wave of storytellers through Tribeca, like, what is the advice you can give these guys? Like, when they see production being down 40%, how many people are saying, "Oh, forget it, I'm just going to go be a doctor or something"?
Well, you don't.
We do need doctors too, just to be clear.
Absolutely. And this isn't brain surgery, but the one thing that technology has enabled any storyteller is, your phone. And you look at your phone and you can write a story on it. You can cast it, you can shoot it, you can produce it, and you can distribute it. So there are new vehicles out there to get your story out there. So it's about creating new platforms. It's really looking how to break the models in a lot of ways. And I think that a lot of models are broken. The distribution system as we know it right now has so radically changed, and where you're watching, how you're watching, when you're watching, it's all changed. So what can you do to get whatever that story out there is? I've worked a lot with the artist JR. We did a little short called Ellis and put it out there free. It was on Apple and Netflix, and it was all over the place, but it was for free. So, it's hard to make a living if you're doing something for free. That's not always the opportunity, but doing something you're passionate about is sometimes worth it.
Yeah. And you think of Sean Baker's Tangerine, which was all shot on an iPhone. And it's incredible. And he won the Academy Award this year for Best Directing for Nora.
Yeah.
So I think whatever you
Not
need
for less than $8 million.
exactly.
And played in theaters, which is something extremely important to him, which is, like, Neon was doing that as well. I mean, we were talking about theaters and needing to get back to big screens, and the Sphere is about as big as you can get, I think. And, talking about technology and embracing new platforms, although, not if you shot something on an iPhone and put it in the Sphere, I don't know what it would look like. But obviously through Tribeca, you had been looking into these emerging platforms, but how did programming for the Sphere become part of your work?
I got to know Jim Dolan. He had owned a part of Tribeca for a number of years, and he was always interested in the work we'd been showing in our immersive program. And when he started the Sphere, he asked me if I had any ideas. And then a couple of years ago, I brought Darren Aronofsky out here to take a look at the Sphere. And
was he like, what in the world are you trying to get me to do? Or did he kind of get it immediately?
No, he didn't know what the hell I was talking about. Quite honestly, I wasn't sure what I was talking about. And the Sphere wasn't even complete. And we toured the Sphere with Jim. And then the Sphere has the most extraordinary sound system. The holoplot system, which is 162,000 multi-directional beams of sound. So wherever you're sitting, you have an extraordinary sound that you're listening to. And then there was a new camera. And I don't know, I somehow convinced Darren that it was a good idea for us to work on something. And so Postcard from Earth has been playing now for about a year and a half. And at the end of August, we have a new project that will be there.
Yeah. Do you want to tell everyone what the new project is if they didn't hear already?
The new project at the Sphere on August 28th will be The Wizard of Oz. And how do you take a classic movie that's in just a small rectangle and put it inside the Sphere? And we've done a lot with up-resing and doing a lot with technology to bring Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow and the Cowardly Lion to life.
Yeah. I cannot wait to see what that looks like. Kind of hard to wrap my head around. I mean, Leslie, as a director, when you walk in and you see something like Postcard from Earth and just think, like, how does anyone do that? Like, what is that like for you, having held cameras and knowing what it takes to do that?
I came to the premiere and was blown away by the technological possibilities. And what Darren did, even just talking to you and Darren about the process, not being able to see dailies except in a headset, like the cameras being so huge to move around, like, how do you shoot this? It's fascinating to me, but this is yet another tool in the technological paint box of what you're going to use as a storyteller. And I think talking to you about what kind of stories can you tell in this medium? Because it's a huge canvas.
It's a huge canvas and it's really exciting, and you can only see it in the Sphere. Even when we have to, you can mix it on a stage, but at the end of the day, you still have to come here and mix it in the Sphere. We're building other spheres. One is being built in Abu Dhabi. Jim has other plans.
That's close.
We'd like to think.
Go listen.
Act global, think global. But what's exciting for me, who's done so many movies, is to do something that is fully immersive, that is not just cinematic, but fully immersive, that you feel like you are right there in the movie. And so many times when you have good stories that you feel, you're talking about being that little girl who's 12 years old, and you feel that, what is it like to now walk into that experience? And that's what the Sphere gives you. And we're just at the tip of what we can do in there. And that's what's, for me, exhilarating as a producer, as a creator, of seeing how we can keep pushing storytelling. And come see it.
Can't wait to see that. I mean, the classic movie
Yeah.
that we all had this very personal relationship with. I can't wait.
That I'm so fortunate and grateful to be working in the sphere right now. I think the one thing that is very special about our industry is that we're all, at the end of the day, really curious people, and that curiosity to keep working and doing new things is something that I know both of us really love.
Yeah, I feel like that curiosity has driven a lot of the experimentation with AI lately. And we mentioned that earlier. And I wanted to bring that to you, Lesli, since AI was such a huge part of strikes that happened 2 years ago. And the Directors Guild did not go on strike, presumably thanks to a lot of long hours of work on your behalf to get there. But it's also something that still scares a lot of people and a lot of directors too. And I think we all know that an AI cannot direct a movie. But like, how is it something that you're approaching through GGA or even just personally, of knowing that these technologies are really appealing and there's a lot you can do with them and a lot that can go wrong, and getting it exactly right feels like something we're still figuring it out.
There are many complications around this. I mean, certainly going back to the strikes in our deal, and again, the DGA, we're directors. We do 2 years of research before we go into negotiations. So we go in very prepared. But with AI, it became critical to us that the language be about no one other than a person, a human being, can do our jobs. Now we feel, at least at this point in history, we feel like we have good provisions, but again, technology is changing very quickly. We have to, be constantly alert, but we cannot be scared of change. Every new innovation in technology has opened up worlds of creativity. So as long as AI is being used by a creator and is not the creator, and that our work and IP is not being used to train AI engines, and recut in a way that the original storyteller never intended. And this has happened throughout history. I mean, you remember back to Clean Flicks?
Oh, was that when they would cut out all the dirty scenes and put it on a streaming service?
This was maybe 20 years ago, but the DGA took them to court. They were recutting directors' the film, because they didn't like the dirty bits. So you would go but the director had no consultation. So scenes would be put together in the most ham-fisted way. And, we got that shut down. But those are the kind of things that we have to be aware of.
Yeah.
But as far as being scared of technology, it's a tool to help us tell our stories.
Yeah. Well, that seems like something that's part of the storytelling summit at Tribeca as well. It's like AI can be part of it as a tool.
Absolutely. Last year at the festival, we did a program with Runway AI. We did another program with Sora, where we gave a group of 5 filmmakers access to Sora models, worked with Sora engineers, and they made a AI story in 6-7 weeks. And I want to say it wasn't like it's a short film. I do believe it's it's its own category. It is a whole new group of creators that are coming into the world. And that's exciting when you see that. But Pandora is out of the box. You've got to be able to learn from it and use it. We have used AI. We are using AI. More about that later this week, with Wizard of Oz. But we've also employed thousands of artists and VFX houses. And you may change one job, but you're also creating multiple other jobs. And it's an exciting time, and we've got to learn from it and not fear it.
Right. As long as AI is not the creator.
No, it's not the
directors, writers, actors, producers, those are the creators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A big question to end on, but I think it's an interesting one to ask people who are as involved in the industry as you guys are. What is giving you hope about the future of storytelling, of Hollywood, of anything else? What's made you feel optimistic lately, or just in general?
I tell you, I think resiliency is our business's superpower. And I think these are really tough times right now. with so many people out of work and the business shrinking the way it has, I do feel our community coming together to support one another and find solutions is what gives me hope and makes me excited. And I have to say, we have to do everything we can to keep filming in America. You know, if you're telling a story that's set in LA, shoot it in LA. If it's New York, shoot it there. You know, and we have to have our company partners, meaning the streamers, the networks, the studios, jump on board. We help them build their companies. They need to help keep us in America. We can't lose storytelling in America.
How about you, Jane? What makes you optimistic?
Certainly gatherings like the Tribeca Film Festival. Tribeca Festival, see, I can't even say that.
It's kind of hard having a break.
And just getting together with colleagues and sharing ideas. And as Leslie says, it's the resilience that we all have. But the world needs artists, and artists' voices in these times are the most important voices. They rise over politicians' voices. They rise over some of the most critical issues of our times. And it's about keeping the voice of the artists out there. And I hope we all continue to do that. And I know we will, especially when you've got directors like my friend Leslie.
And both
my friend Jane.
It was such a pleasure getting to witness your friendship playing out in stage real time. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you all for being here to watch us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this special episode of the podcast. We'll be back with a regular episode next. This podcast is edited by Brett Fuchs and produced by Brett Fuchs and me. Our theme music is by Dave Gonzalez. Thanks again to Lesli, Linka, Glatter, Jane Rosenthal, to NAB, and everyone else who hosted us in Las Vegas. Subscribe to the Prestige Junkie newsletter at theankler.com and subscribe to this podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you back on our regular schedule soon.